Well, we continue to follow the latest developments as CUPE education workers, some 55,000 strong across this province, have walked off the job today. Joining us live to talk more about the government position on this is Ontario Education Minister Stephen Lecce. Minister Lecce, you've seen what's happening at Queen's Park. You've seen what's happening outside your constituency office. Despite the notwithstanding clause, despite the threats of fines, workers have walked off the job. How do you assess the situation we're in right now? What needs to change?
Yeah, I believe that our schools need to be open and that our kids should be in class. What CUPE is doing, closing schools, causing further interruptions on families because they were, as of last Sunday, determined to increase wages and compensation by nearly 50%, I think is just frankly unacceptable. We stand with parents who insist that the schools are open. We know the impacts on mental, physical, social, emotional health, and we know that the strike is now illegal. And so we're urging the union to put our kids first, to come back to our classes, to help get these kids caught up. We've passed a law because we knew all along, Nick, from day one, from the summer when they proceeded on a strike mandate before the government even proposed our first offer. So we shouldn't be here. Families shouldn't be here, but we now have legislation that gives us tools, and I want parents to hear us loud and clear. We will use every tool available to government to open these schools, bring some end to this needless, illegal strike that is hurting just so many kids today. And I think it is very sad.
How soon, Minister, could you start using the fines that are in Bill 28, these not only individual fines, but potentially fines against the union? Would we be seeing that today? Is that a tone you're going to try to set?
Nick, we immediately upon passing the Keeping Students in Class Act, we filed a submission to the Ontario Labour Relations Board. That's in response to CUPE's illegal strike action. The proceedings started last night, and they're going to continue today. And we're going to make a vigorous case that there must be an end to this disruption. The children in Ontario have paid the price of the pandemic. You have a concern, come at 4 o'clock and protest at Queen's Park. Come and protest at any government office. To walk out on kids is not fair, and they should not be the casualty. And I'm urging the union, appreciating we have principled differences of opinion, and this happens, as you know, Nick, every few years in Ontario, there are strikes, local or provincial, every premier, every party. When we are providing the highest pay in the country, when we are providing pensions and benefits and 131 paid sick days, when we are providing job security that no one had through the pandemic, I'm asking for some focus and decency. I'm asking for everyone to pause for a moment and reflect on who they're hurting. And that's why we've appealed to the Ontario Labour Relations Board to really send a clear signal that we want kids in class. The illegal strike is not fair, and frankly, we're not going to tolerate it. And I want to see kids back in school. It's as simple as that, and the Premier and our government will use every available tool at our disposal to provide some assurance to the families that we're on their side, and we're going to fight hard to get them back.
One of the big tools that you're using, of course, is invoking the notwithstanding clause on this, effectively imposing the contract on the unions. Minister Lecce, the Prime Minister's come out and said this is not the way it's supposed to be used. The Canadian Civil Liberties Union have said this is not the way it's supposed to be used, calling it a heavy-handed tactic. You're seeing other unions now who are sort of next in line for negotiations saying they're concerned about how negotiations are going to go. That seems to be one of the main sticking points here. I realize you have issues with what the union is doing here, but the government, a lot of people are saying the government is just being too heavy-handed on this. Is there an ability to reverse course on that to perhaps then reopen talks?
Nick, the only reason why the government imposed legislation or introduced it on Monday was because the union on Sunday invoked a 5-day notice when on that day they believed it was the right thing to do to strike on Friday because they weren't getting a 33% increase in wages, nearly 50% increase in compensation. They made that decision. They decided to strike. And so the government really having no option, we could have not had legislation. That means there could have been endless strikes with no accountability, no enforcement of government, no power of government to stop it. But we introduced the legislation reacting to the union's decision to strike on Friday. On that point, on Sunday, this past Sunday, they insisted on higher pay to the point of nearly 50% in compensation all in. And we said, look, let's carry on the discussions. They, of course, said no, even after we increased their offer. So, just the chronology of events here is important. It was in the summer, Nick, where they decided to seek a strike mandate before the government even introduced or proposed our first offer. This was their intention all along.
I understand all of that, Minister. We've heard you say that time and time again over the last several days, but that is kind of how the system works, right? They have to give those 5 days of strike notice. This is kind of all part of bargaining. The issue, it seems, to some people on one side of the argument is the use of the notwithstanding clause effectively eliminates bargaining.
The government was negotiating with the union literally hours before the bill passed yesterday, as I confirmed to you all. We were literally in a room negotiating, trying to avert the use of legislation. We simply asked, take the strike off the table. But they didn't, Nick. In any way, would they commit to that? Because I think they wanted to proceed with this strike. They had done their preparations and nothing was going to stop them. And that's why the government had no choice. But we brought forth legislation, and we have an obligation to parents who sent us to Queen's Park to stand up for them. And when we are, essentially told we are going to strike in 5 days because we're not getting our demands for compensation of nearly 50%, I think any responsible government would introduce legislation to force our workers to go back to class and support our kids. That's exactly what we did. And you have to appreciate what preceded the other. The strike mandate on the strike 5-day notice on Sunday, the government's legislation on Monday. We moved swiftly and passed the bill so that we now have some authority, and we're going to use every tool at the disposal of government to get the kids back. Because at the end of the day, the heavy-handed approach here is a strike imposed on millions of kids and a million parents and our entire society and economy that is having to face this type of anxiety today. And I don't think it is fair on them. I think there was a better way, a negotiated option. But because they're striking, we brought forth a bill that, fundamentally says you got to get back to class. We've got to put our kids first after 2 years of pandemic disruptions. And I think a lot of parents want us to move forward and ensure that the kids are in school.
So, Minister, what happens now? We understand there may be some sort of a labor board meeting or hearing this afternoon. What could that entail?
Well, we brought forth a submission to the Ontario Labour Relations Board yesterday, frankly, after the passage of the law, given that the union confirmed that they're proceeding now with this illegal strike. We hope to hear back today or tomorrow, potentially, on the findings. In the meantime, we're going to be using all the pressures and, frankly, all the levers of the legislation to get kids back to school. We've set out a clear expectation to our school boards to use every power, every authority to open as many schools for as many kids as humanly possible. They are required to do online live learning if they absolutely cannot. Try to find some support for vulnerable kids, including kids with special education who depend on routine, who need to be in school. I think about children from vulnerable segments of our population who won't be able to access speech pathology and mental health therapy and social workers and, frankly, nutrition programs for breakfast. I mean, this comes with significant consequence on society and on kids. And I'm just hoping some decency, some focus on kids will really triumph in the emotions of the last few hours, and that the union will hear us loud and clear for truly for the sake of kids that we all serve, I think that we all care about. Please end this strike and put kids first, end this illegal strike, and get back to class, and let's make a difference for our kids.
Minister, though, some people are pointing to what appears to be kind of a reversal on your government. A couple of years ago, you were talking so much about the potential benefits of online learning, of the ability for students to learn out of class rather than in class. And then, of course, the Ontario government, locked down and kept kids out of school for longer than almost any other jurisdiction in the world. So some people are suggesting that that's really an about-face, that you're now highlighting and emphasizing so much the importance of students to be in class. How do you respond to that?
The plan to catch up we announced after this pandemic that affected every child in every region of the world is premised on a belief that kids need to be in normal, stable, enjoyable schools. We've increased the funding of $650 million in publicly funded schools. We've hired 7,000 more education workers. We've hired almost 1,000 more teachers. We've increased tutoring supports in publicly funded schools to $175 million. There's no province in this country that is investing more, including a 420% increase in mental health. We are passionately committed to improving publicly funded schools. We believe kids should be in class. We appreciate they've been through so much. And that's why I think it is absolutely imprudent and critical that the government stands up for parents who simply want their kids in class. And we will make the case every day using every tool that these kids could simply get back to the normal, positive routine they established just 2 short months ago.
Okay, that is Education Minister Stephen Lecce making the government's case this afternoon here live on CP24 Live at noon. Appreciate the time, Minister. Thank you for that.